So this is a subject that I think is quite dear to both of us, right?
Yeah, definitely. When you talk about TV shows that you grew up with, if you are your age and my age, you cannot avoid the subject of filler episodes.
Agreed. And I think the takeaway from this episode, the one big lesson is, if you think filler episodes are bad,
you are so wrong.
Yes.
You are so wrong.
We started having this conversation when you told me you'd seen like a chop list online that was like, here's all the key episodes of Buffy, and here's all the ones that you can cut out.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of Buffy reading recently. I've been reading the new comics, and whenever you look up anything about any of these shows, some of the first search results that come up are lists of episodes to avoid. And I find that really depressing. Yeah,
I found the same thing. I found one for Farscape, which is probably my favourite show of all time. And like, there are whole websites. There's a website called animefillerlist.com.
Yeah.
You type in the name of an anime and it says, oh, here's like 75 episodes you can just cut out entirely. I know that we're all busy, but I can't help but feel that these are missing the point.
100%. If you were to ask me, Lottie, you need to boil down Buffy to its absolutely essential episodes, I would probably just walk away from you.
Nice.
Because how do you pick apart essential from your favourites?
I think that's a really key point, is by doing that, you're often going to miss some really great episodes because they don't contribute to the story, but they're fantastic in their own right. Through the modern lens, we've now got modern streaming services like Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, like there's tons now. And this means that TV shows can be more focused than ever, right?
And you could argue, very successfully, I am sure, that TV is better than ever.
Agreed. And without being syndicated, TV shows can be way more focused now. You know, something like Haunting of Hill House or Stranger Things. A season could be 12 episodes, it could be 8 episodes.
And each episode can be as long as it needs to be as well. Some episodes are 50 minutes long, some episodes are over an hour long. There are episodes of shows out there that are less than 30 minutes. And that's not the standard throughout the entire show. Each episode is as long as it needs to be.
Yeah, there's no fat on it, right? And everything can then contribute to the story. And, you know, it's all killer, no filler.
But what do you do if you like the fat?
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. For those of you who are watching who didn't grow up watching syndicated TV, back when TV was beamed through the air over radio waves, you got loads of telly. You got
so much TV.
You got loads. A season of a TV show would have at least 22 episodes, sometimes more, right? Networks would want at least 6 months of content.
Yeah, they needed that print in the Radio Times. Remember the Radio Times?
They had to have all this content, and it was to fill up the winter.
Yes.
I found this out when researching this. It was to fill out the winter. And then I realised, maybe that's why they call it a season. And, you know, every episode had to be an hour. Because like you said, that they had to fill out the schedule on the TV channel because it was broadcast in order. Now, I don't think anybody is capable of writing top-tier quality storytelling.
I know, I'm certainly not.
With 22 solid hours. Like, no one can fill that up. I would say in a 22-episode season of any given show, you'd be lucky if maybe 8 of them move the story forward.
I think when I looked at the Buffy the Vampire Slayer essential episode, it was between 6 and 8 episodes per season.
And the rest that you'd fill out the season with would be called filler episodes, which is...
It's an awful term, filler episodes. The idea that these episodes just exist to fill space.
Some of my favourite episodes happen to be those filler episodes, those much maligned filler episodes. And I'm going to say the reason for this is because they are unshackled from that requirement of having to push the story forward. These episodes could go in any direction. They could push the story sideways for a bit instead of forwards. They could fill out the world with all these weird little side stories, or they could expand on some random character that you maybe wouldn't have had time to explore in the main show. What we're going to do is we're going to look at 5 episodes that we think represents the cream of the crop from this era.
No one would ever say that it is essential to watch these episodes to really understand what is going on in the show, but these episodes represent the absolute soul of the show.
Oh. I'm going to start with Farscape, Through the Looking Glass. Growing up, one of my favourite shows from the Stoked era was Farscape. It is essentially a John Carter-like story. It's about this astronaut who accidentally gets blasted off to some distant galaxy and he just finds himself in trouble. Farscape hints at a bigger story quite early on, but it always found the time to have these bonkers, off-the-wall, crazy episodes. And season 1, episode 17, I think is probably the first truly classic filler episode. It is a classic Something's Wrong with the Ship episode where Moya, and that's the ship's name for those of you who don't know, has split into 3 different versions, divided over 3 different dimensions. And so the crew are then split up into these different dimensions. One of them is a dimension where the light makes you puke. One of them is a universe where there's this constant horrible noise. And one of them is a universe where everyone just acts like they've been huffing nitrous. It's just utterly bizarre. At the beginning of the episode, the crew are arguing, they're bickering, they're falling out. They've all been struggling to get along since they get thrown together in the events from the first episode. They're a diverse group of aliens from all these different cultures, and they're all from different parts of the galaxy, and so there's this real friction between them, and that remains an ever-present part of the story as we go through. But at the end of the episode, it is the crew's differences that end up saving them. Chiana's senses are really susceptible to the sound, and so she's paralysed in that realm, but Erin figures out how to use her technology to filter the noise out. The light keeps making Crichton puke, but it doesn't bother Dargo at all. And so between them, by working together and by championing their differences, they overcome the problem. It's the differences, of which there are none, which makes the sameness exceptional. And Through the Looking Glass then ends with them all having come out the other side of this. They all nearly die, and it ends with them all laughing at their near-death experience, and Pilot doesn't quite get it. But it's this great inverse of the opening scene. I personally have a really deep personal love of dinner scenes, and it's just got this great cozy energy that really just makes my heart smile. But it's exactly this kind of whimsical writing that made me fall in love with Farscape in the first place. Through the Looking Glass is only one example of Farscape just trying to be this bizarre, weird, sexy science fiction, and from here it really only just got weirder, creativer, and just a lot sexier, to be honest.
I love Farscape.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So good. The X-Files has an absolute ton of incredible filler episodes, but the episode I settled on was How the Ghosts Stole Christmas. The setup is it's Christmas Eve and Scully is in her car that is packed with presents, and she clearly has terrible boundary issues because she is sat outside a haunted house talking to Mulder, who is trying to convince her to go into the house. It turns out the house is haunted every Christmas Eve by a couple who killed themselves several years ago in a suicide pact. Mulder and Scully go into the house. The house mysteriously locks the doors behind them. They end up getting possessed by the ghosts to recreate the suicide pact because the ghosts believe that the only thing that Christmas truly means is loneliness. Hijinks ensue, and they end up escaping. They end up in Mulder's apartment, sitting on the sofa, exchanging gifts that they told each other they wouldn't do, but they did anyway. And I get to the end of that episode and my heart feels so full. Just so full. This episode is a great example of the relationship between Mulder and Scully. It is Christmas Eve. Scully has better things to do, but she is, however reluctantly, still there for Mulder. knowing that he doesn't have anything else going on and he's gonna go in that house anyway, and she just knows it will turn out better for him if she is there. And it's just so goddamn sweet. We know that they care about each other, and it's through events like this in so-called filler episodes where you truly understand the depths of their relationship. This episode is from season 6 and it came after the film. The budget per episode after the film came out doubled. This episode is the cheapest episode of the whole season and was designed to save money.
Yeah.
But despite the fact that it is literally 4 people in one location, it is a really awesome, low-key episode. It warms the relationship between Mulder and Scully without all the end-of-the-world drama. It is a cute, cozy Christmas episode that can stand alone within season 6.
When we started making a list about filler episodes, I knew I wanted to talk about Star Trek. But I would say Star Trek The Next Generation, which is probably my favourite Trek series, I don't think it would really qualify for filler episodes because I don't think it really had a bigger ongoing narrative. I think in a way every episode kind of was already its own separate little adventure, so in a way they're kind of all filler. But DS9 though did have a bigger narrative, and from the beginning I think it sets out, it intends to have.
Deep Space Nine is big from the beginning, not just in the sense of the space station is huge, but the world they are building is so much bigger than the world that Next Gen was building. Yeah,
me and my mates, we would have this joke. We had this sort of running joke that if you did 2 episodes of DS9 that had spaceships and laser guns and space battles, then the budget was run out, and so you had to do a Jake and Nog episode to sort of balance.
Absolutely.
Balance the books.
Absolutely. It had to be a Jake and Nog episode or the baseball episode, which was probably 3 cameras in a baseball field.
Yeah.
Like, what would be the budget on that?
Death to the opposition.
So the episode I chose to talk about, I think, is a straight banger. It is Treachery, Faith, and the Great River. It's right at the beginning of season 7, so by this point we are thick in the Dominion Ward. And yet, somehow, the B story in this episode, they found the time to write in this silly little story just to keep things light and airy and so things don't get too tense. Treachery, Faith, and the Great River is the Star Trek equivalent of the Straw Millionaire. Or actually, a more modern equivalent would be one of those YouTube trade-up videos where you start with a paperclip and you end with a house.
I love those.
Yeah.
Seriously, like, where does that even come from?
The plot of the episode is that Chief O'Brien has been given 72 hours to get hold of a new graviton stabilizer, and he cannot get it in time.
Well, that is your problem, Chief.
And so Nog, who has recently got a Starfleet role, steps in and says, "Let me help." And he sets up this really complicated series of trades in order to get this graviton stabilizer, but he'll it's all just like silly science fiction MacGuffins. It's just made up terms, I'm sure of it. Like, oh, we need to get a new phaser array from the USS Crazy Horse, and we're going to swap it with the chief engineer from some Romulan trade vessel, and they're going to give us a new induction modulator or whatever it might be. He just sets up this Peter to Paul series of trades, and eventually there's one bit where he even gets Sisko's desk. He trades out Sisko's desk to this guy. This guy wants to get he wants to take a picture behind Sisko's desk because he collects photographs of desks. He ends up taking some of General Martok's blood wine, and then Martok's on the warpath, and the whole thing looks like it's going to fall apart. But Nog pulls it all together, and it all happens. Like, the desk gets put back. Martok gets better wine for having taken part in the trade. Everything gets resolved by the end of the episode, and it's just this great bit of like light-hearted storytelling in the middle of what would otherwise be this like really dense political social commentary, which is what DS9 was doing at the time. It was really delving into lots of very complicated and complex story, but the writers of the show managed to find just the right amount of levity to stop the show getting too bogged down in that. Nog is awesome.
Okay, Buffy.
Yeah.
The episode I've chosen from Buffy is episode 8 from the first season, I, Robot, You, Jane. We're in season 1, so we are still world building, which is honestly one of my favourite parts about syndicated TV shows. The premise of iRobot Eugene is a techno-pagan,
Yeah, amazing.
which I find the term fantastic, is bringing Sunnydale's library into the 20th century by scanning all of Giles's creepy books. Books about demonology that apparently are kept at Sunnydale High. The scanner reads a book into the computer and unleashes a demon presence into the internet. 1997 internet.
Excellent.
Nazi Germany was a model of a well-ordered society? Like that?
Moloch the Corruptor just wants everybody to love and worship him. So he targets Willow because she's feeling all sad and lonely because Xander doesn't fancy her. And he just catfishes her. He pretends to be some guy living 80 miles down the road, and he goes to X school, and no one would know him because he lives in Burkittsville or something like that. And the whole episode, if you want to take an adult view of it, which is definitely not the view I took of it when I first watched it, but like now, the whole episode is about how people should be concerned about who they are talking to online. We're talking about 1997 internet here, so we're talking like
Just chat rooms.
Just chat rooms where the whole thing about people pretending to be people who they aren't really came to light. What I think is really good about this episode is that this episode would have also been watched by parents. Like, this was a thing that my parents were aware of, that existed, people talking to other people on the internet.
Yeah, although it abstracts the issue because it's not a real predator, it's a demon.
It is a demon.
It does still give the viewers who would be young people, it gives them a vocabulary. Like if they were talking on the internet in real life with someone they'd never met, your friends would be like, oh, remember that episode about Buffy though? Careful.
Absolutely. So one of the reasons that I really like this episode is it's a great way to tap into the anxieties of the time. So meeting someone online was a real world concern, women meeting up with men who weren't who they claimed to be. The other thing that I really like about this episode is this is one of the first introductions of the toxic online influence. Moloch the Corruptor corrupts several male students within Sunnydale High and convinces them to commit acts of violence against Buffy because Moloch knows that Buffy is onto him.
Yeah, he sort of reaches out to these disenfranchised young men.
Yep, they're disenfranchised, they're nerds, no one wants to speak to them. One of them is known for violence, having been suspended several times, I think. And this is years before 4chan, years before Reddit, and yet those are things that we see today.
Yeah.
And you look at the world today and go, that is a real thing that happens.
Yeah, it's quite prescient.
It also shows Buffy's struggle between being the Slayer and being a teenage girl. Lots of the filler episodes in early Buffy are Buffy trying to breach the gap between being a regular girl and being the Slayer and what the responsibilities of both of those means. Techno-pagan.
Alright, so I don't think I could ever make a video where I don't mention something to do with Star Wars. And I wanted to do Clone Wars, because Clone Wars has got some real banger one-off episodes. Originally, I wanted to do that Seven Samurai homage episode, which I just love. But for reasons that are beyond me, nobody seems to like episodes about the droids.
This is an absolute travesty. The heart of Star Wars are the droids and the clones. My boys.
Yeah. So the episode that I chose is called A Sunny Day in the Void. The reason I chose this one really mostly is because of the presentation. It has these really beautiful pastel colours, and it kind of has this really flattened perspective for a lot of it, which basically just makes the whole thing look like a Mobius comic, which is just chef kiss. The creature designs that are in it are kind of like something from Valerian and Laureline. The droids are just bleep bleep blooping all over the place. There's not that much dialogue. It just has this really great band dessinée energy. I actually wish this episode had been entirely without dialogue. I think that would have made it even better. But what I love is in the Star Wars universe where we know there are whole planets that are just ice planets, or there's lava planets, or there's casino planets. It's like, yeah, why not also have a Franco-Belgian comic book planet? Like, brilliant. I just think this is another example of the filler episode being used as a breather in the middle of a much bigger storyline, which is exactly what this is. And so I think that's why, in a way, these filler episodes are maligned, because it is taking away from the bigger arc, but actually what it's really doing is slowing things down and giving the bigger story room to breathe. Also, I think that this episode is a really good example of an episode that can be fun, an episode that can be creative, and an episode that can be experimental, and that really only happens in filler episodes. And that is what I love about filler episodes. The episodes that we've spoken about today have contributed nothing to the wider story that they're part of, right? You could cut these episodes out entirely, and technically you would lose nothing.
Only technically.
Now, we love them, and I don't think this is just nostalgia.
Absolutely. Filler episodes allow a creative team to explore why they are even there in the first place, why the creators made the show. If you boiled X-Files down to its absolute mythology, I believe you would completely miss the reason Chris Carter created the show. If the X-Files was made now, it would be 8 episodes a show, and you would lose so much. You would lose every single episode that I know people call their favourites. You wouldn't have How the Ghost Stole Christmas, for one, but you wouldn't have Tombs, you wouldn't have Fluke, you wouldn't have the Fiji Mermaid, and you certainly wouldn't have the Postmodern Prometheus.
Oh, banger.
Which I had a genuine several-day struggle between the Postmodern Prometheus and How the Ghost Stole Christmas.
Yeah. And I would say with something like Star Trek, as I mentioned earlier, the filler episodes can take a break from the bigger, sort of heavier political issues, the war, the clashing ideologies. And instead we can just have an episode of Odo the Copper trying to catch Quark with his fingers in the cookie jar. Or like you said, the crew having a big game of baseball.
Just a game of baseball.
More modern shows, they tend to pack every episode with as much punch as possible, which means every episode needs to drive the cast to where they need to be, and it doesn't waste any time doing any of the kind of mundane human stuff. But when these modern shows do take the time to show that mundane human stuff, I f***ing love it every single time.
The lasting personal relationships that you form with these shows are built on these filler episodes. Will people still be fans of Stranger Things in 20 years the way I am still a fan of Buffy and X-Files now?
I mean, I think with the dawn of streaming, this was always going to happen. It's like a logical conclusion.
It's just an evolution. It's an evolution of the storytelling method. You have Star Trek at your fingertips now. You have The Haunting of Bly Manor at your fingertips. You have Stranger Things at your fingertips. As and whenever you want to watch it.
And like you said, arguably, it's better than it's ever been. I'm just saying, though, that I miss the odd random musical episode, or the VR Gamer one that was written by William Gibson.
Bring it on.
I miss those stupid episodes. So what are your favourite episodes of, whatever shows you're into? I would bet that it's not a mythology episode. I will bet that anyone's favourite episode of any show is technically a filler episode. Thanks very much for watching this one. Welcome to Lottie. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you for having me.
It's been amazing having you here. It was such a good subject that we obviously are so passionate about. I'm going to upload the full-length audio separately from this episode, and I'll put it up for channel members. So if you guys are interested in becoming channel members, then I'll put up a longer podcast episode. The audio is about an hour long. It'd be really cool if you want to check that out. Thanks very much, everyone.
Peace.